Title: The Gate No One Watched. Year: 130 million. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. Long ago, the once God ruled the 5 cities of ash from a throne made of memory and flame. They were worshipped not for power, but precision. Each decree balanced between justice and silence, each miracle unseen. But when the gods fell out of fashion, when temples turned to libraries and prayers to policy, the once God stepped down. Voluntarily, they walked from their throne to the outlands and disappeared. What remained was a whisper, a rumor that they had not vanished, but were watching, waiting for the world to prove it no longer needed gods. Centuries passed. Then came the whisper that endures. No one knew who they were, only that where they walked, old laws softened. Rival cities broke bread, and the very walls between clans cracked from laughter. No power, no army, just courage. And one question: why do you still believe they are not us? They reached the gate of Vale, the last unbroken border between the city of logic and the tribes of myth. It had never opened, not once, but that day it did. Chapter 2. The whisper entered the city without permission. It carried no weapon, only a ledger, pages full of shared truths, gathered from both sides. Stories of births and hiding, markets shared through secret tunnels, lovers separated by law, not choice. City officials demanded an explanation. What do you seek? The whisper smiled, not approval, just acknowledgement. Inside the hall of parameters, they read aloud the oldest civic code. Unity is deviation. Separation ensures safety. And then read its forgotten footnote. Until safety becomes the greater wall. Guards wavered. Children watched. And somewhere beyond the crowd, the once God stirred. Chapter 3. Disguised in plain robes, the once God approached the whisper at night. You speak well, they said, but what happens when your words fade? The whisper replied, and the actions echo. Together they planted a garden between the cities, not as a symbol, as food. The once God remained nameless, tending soil and questions. The whisper visited but never stayed, and slowly the gate of Vale lost its purpose. People crossed, freighted, told jokes, built homes that faced both ways. No declaration was signed, no heroes crowned, but the once God, one morning, looked up from a sprouting fig and smiled, because the most honorable wins are earned when no one's watching, and this one was shared, quietly, courageously, completely. Title: The Quiet Room Within. Year: 129,807,692.3. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The saboteur of fate was tired of being blamed for the collapse of futures. She never intended to destroy destinies, only to challenge them. Her magic unraveled preordained threads just enough for people to choose differently. But choices came with consequences, and those who couldn't cope pointed fingers. So she disappeared into the ashful expanse, where stories lost their endings and maps erased themselves. There, she found the scribe of vanishing things. He lived in a tower you could only see when grieving. His ink was made of forgotten dreams. His quill, a feather plucked from an unspoken regret. He chronicled what the world chose not to remember. You came to be forgotten, he said. I came to remember myself, she replied. And he opened the door to the quiet room. Chapter 2. The quiet room wasn't a space, it was a state. No walls, no ceiling, dust to memory and the echo of thoughts. Each day she entered, faced echoes of every fate she fractured. A prince who crumbled without his prophecy. A rebel who faltered without divine timing. A widow who never met the lover she might have healed. She wept, screamed, laughed, listened, and each night the scribe recorded not her pain but her reflection. You cannot fix what you won't feel, he said. And I cannot stay if I always feel, she countered. You are learning balance, he said. The world rarely does. Outside, war brewed again. People craved certainty. Myths sharpened into weapons. And so she left the tower. Chapter 3. She returned not as the saboteur, but as a teacher. She told stories without heroes, taught kings to listen before they decreed, built sanctuaries in cities' rooms where silence was honored and tears translated into policy. The scribe followed quietly, writing down only what was unspoken. And slowly, those who entered the quiet rooms began healing, because it was never the world that broke them. It was the part they refused to enter, the quiet room within, and the greatest test was daring to walk inside it, alone, and return together. Title: The Whisper Between Threads. Year: 129,615,384.6. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The uncut thread was not a weaver. She was a wanderer, who carried a spool that never ended, threading moments together without knowing where they would lead. Her path had no pattern, only presence. She stitched connections between strangers, patched holes in forgotten places, and left behind no explanations, only softened edges. In the city of Elry Spire, where ambition towered above empathy, she found herself drawn to a ruined plaza where no one lingered. It had been the site of a riot once. Now only dust and silence remained. She knelt and sewed the first stitch into the air, and the wind changed. Chapter 2. Enter the truth with no tongue. He was a bard who lost his voice in a war of words. Now he told stories through gesture, symbol, and the long quiet of listening. His truth was not spoken, it was witnessed. He watched the thread for days. Watched as she helped an old merchant carry his wares 3 steps farther each morning, as she handed a child a button made from sky glass and said, "This belongs to someone kind, maybe you," as she mended the hem of a widow's coat, and in doing so prepared her will to walk outside again. He approached with a map. On it were no cities, only intersections of small kindnesses. She added a stitch, and nodded. Chapter 3. Together they mapped the unmapped. They traveled not to save, but to soften. They placed thread on benches, in courtyards, inside books thread others picked up without realizing. People began waving to strangers, forgiving debts, naming stars after lost pets, writing songs to plants. His city didn't change. His heart did. One evening they returned to the ruined plaza. It pulsed with laughter and candlelight. Someone had planted herbs where blood once ran. The truth with no tongue drew a final symbol on the wall. A thread, and a whisper, the uncut thread left behind her spool, not empty, a plate, as some truths wear stardust and bone, not to mystify, but to pierce gently, and once pierced, the world ripples in kindness, unseen, but never unfelt. Title: The Fire That Held the Lying. Year: 129,423,076.9. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Flame. Walker never left footprints. Wherever she walked, the ground remembered only warmth, not ash, not scorch. People followed her not because she was loud, but because she reminded them of what courage felt like before fear dressed itself in logic. She arrived in Calvin district just before it burned. The city buzzed with tension. Officials smiled with too many teeth. Whispers of forced relocation, resource seizures, and quiet disappearances fill alleys. But no one dared resist, until the flame. Walker set her hearth on the council steps. She said nothing, just lit a fire, and waited. That night a child brought kindling. The next day a widow brought tea. By the 5th night the fire had a name, the survivor of ruin, and the city began to remember how to stand. Chapter 2. Among the crowd she found him, a survivor, once a soldier, now a silent gardener. He had lost everything in the border cleansing and spoke only through what he grew. His hands trembled with memory, but his eyes held something else. Resolve. "You know what's coming," she said. He nodded. "But you stayed." He looked at the fire, then at her. "Because someone must." That night the enforcers came. They surrounded the flame, ordered dispersal. She didn't move. Neither did the survivor. One by one others joined. Teacher, a baker, a politician's sibling. No slogans, no violence, just presence and firelight. Chapter 3. The Flame. Walker spoke only once. "Follow what sets you on fire, not what keeps you busy," and then turned to face the lead enforcer. She did not threaten. She did not beg. She simply opened her arms, and flames rose not from anger, but from truth. They danced around her, showing memories of every injustice left unspoken, every voice stifled by convenience. The enforcers backed away. The order never came, and the fire remained. Afterward, a survivor took her place. He spoke at last, taught others not just how to tend flame, but how to stand when it's easier to sit. And Calvin, that stood, because standing for others wasn't a slogan. It was a chain reaction, lit by one who walked without prints, and never burned what she touched, only awakened it. Title: The Spark Beneath the Stillness. Year: 129,230,769.2. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Flame Prophet was a walking contradiction. Draped in fire-retardant robes and followed by a fan club of ex-monks and disgruntled tax clerks, he wandered from city to city, igniting ceremonial flames and accidentally resolving bureaucratic disputes. His sermons were part revelation, part roast, delivered with the zeal of a mystic and the timing of a stand-up comic. The color of quiet things was his complete opposite. She never raised her voice above a whisper, hosted mediation circles in abandoned libraries, and communicated primarily through tea selection and long pauses. Naturally, the council of the perpetually divided summoned both of them to fix a border feud that had outlasted 6 generations and 3 calendar systems. No one expected anything useful, especially not them. Chapter 2. The Flame Prophet arrived first. He lit a bonfire on the neutral line and declared, "Let all who shouted themselves hoarse come toast marshmallows and reconsider their life choices." The crowd stared. One man brought marshmallows. The caller arrived next. She brewed tea, refused to speak until everyone had a cup. By sunset, they were sitting in awkward silence, soldiers, mayors, fence-post scholars, all nursing lukewarm peace in ceramic mugs. Then came the choice. A child, bored of waiting, stepped forward and asked, "Why do we fight again?" The mayors blinked. The soldiers glanced around. The prophet raised a brow. "Excellent question." Anyone got an answer not older than the moon. The caller of quiet things simply pointed to a map and tore it in half, then rejoined it, slightly tilted. Perfectly fair. No one screamed. Instead, someone laughed. Chapter 3. In the days that followed, agreements were made. Not treaties, picnics. Trade routes reimagined as board games. Shared custody of a coat that had wandered into neutral territory. The Council of the Perpetually Divided reluctantly changed its name to the Council of Mild Disagreements. The Flame Prophet and the caller parted ways with matching tattoos. A flame and a teacup. They never worked together again, but the towns they touched built a shared plaza. No statues. Just a plaque. A single choice can dissolve centuries of silence. And beneath that, sometimes the answer isn't louder. It's shared marshmallows. And so peace was stitched from satires, steeped in stillness, and rusted to perfection. Title: The Path Without a Map. Year: 129,038,461.5. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The echo of creation was not born. She was sung into being. In the mountain sanctum of the loft's reach, where snow whispered and stars hummed, a child emerged from the harmonics of ancient ritual sound molded into soul. She had no lineage, no past, only a voice, and a yearning to belong. They named her Echo, and feared her power, for when she spoke, stones softened. When she cried, flowers bloomed. When she laughed, hearts broke open. So they told her to be quiet. She left, with nothing but a tired satchel and a question she couldn't stop asking. Where do I become real? At the edge of the lowlands. She met the masked smith. Chapter 2. He was ancient and awkward, always hammering identity into masks for those who wanted to be someone else. Leaders, lovers, liars, heroes. His shop smelled of regret and cedar. She asked him for a mask. He said, "You don't need one." "Everyone says that before they ask for one," she replied. He didn't argue. Instead, he handed her an uncut mask. "Part it yourself, but only after you walk a path." "What path?" "Any. Just walk." So she did. She traveled the border towns, slept in barns, sang for bread, hugged crying strangers in market squares. Each time someone opened their heart, she etched a line into her mask, but it remained unfinished until she reached a city wall. Chapter 3. The city had fallen silent. Oppression disguised as order. Kindness outlawed in the name of efficiency. Children taught to fear emotion. Songs replaced by slogans. Echo stood at the gate and sang. No melody, just truth. Soft, wild, uncontained. And the wall cracked. Inside, a boy dropped his weapon. A woman tore her license of silence. A merchant hummed. And from within the mask and Echo's satchel came a final sound. Compassion. It snapped in half, because she no longer needed it. There was no map. Only her feet. And the ground she made sacred by loving it with presence. The masked smith found her days later, tending a garden in the square once used for executions. He asked if she was done. She smiled. There is no done. And the just society they spoke of. It began there, with no plans, only love and footsteps. Title: The Voice Forged in Echoes. Year: 128,146,123.8. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Masked One was not born but chosen. Each generation, the elder seers of Merith would select a child to carry the mask of trials, an artifact that revealed not truths, but the shadows cast by them. The masked one would walk the lands, gather failings like harvest, and return to the citadel only after learning the meaning of triumph. Many never returned. This time, the mask chose a child named Ira. She was quiet, analytical, often called too cautious, too slow. But when she placed the mask upon her face, the world shifted, and the skinwalker of destiny stirred. Chapter 2. The skinwalker wore no form for long. It manifested as fear and pride, then longing. It trailed behind Ira, invisible to all but her masked eyes, mimicking every failure she refused to name. When she hesitated to speak truth, her voice vanished for a week. When she lied to protect someone, her hands forgot how to hold tools. Each mistake marked her, but she pressed on. She failed to stop a flood. She misread a prophecy. She trusted someone who stole her firewood, her food, her map. But she survived, and each time she sat in failure, not fleeing it. The mask grew warmer. Chapter 3. Years passed. Ira returned to Melrith with no fanfare. Her cloak was ragged, her satchel empty, but her eyes held weight. The elders prepared to remove the mask. She stopped them. "Not yet," she said. "I have one more trial." She stood before the flame of Echo, an ancient relic that reflected only what had been overcome. She whispered every failure aloud, named them, claimed them, and as the final syllable left her lips, the skinwalker emerged not to strike, but bow. It took her form, knelt, and vanished. The mask cracked, split, and fell. Iris stood, not as the masked one, as herself. The elders wept, not from sorrow, from awe, because a triumph without struggle is an echo without voice. But hers was now thunder, and the next child chosen would learn from her story not to succeed, but to struggle with grace, and grow, unmasked. Title: The Ashes That Grow. Year: 128,653,146.2. Year: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The burned pilgrim arrived on foot, dragging behind him a wagon of ashes. No one asked whose ashes they were. In the hill town of Karen's Bend, once a stronghold, now a relic, people had learned not to ask about burdens that looked heavy. They simply watched as the pilgrim began sweeping the old chapel square. He said nothing. He carried a brand on his chest where the mark of royalty used to be. Now it was just scar tissue in quiet labor. On the 7th day, an elder approached. "What are you doing?" "Preparing," he said. "For what?" "For growth." From the ashes he pulled seeds. Chapter 2. Enter the blind healer. She had once tended to kings and executioners alike. Her blindness came not from birth, but from mercy given willingly in exchange for the life of a child condemned under false judgment. Now she walked with a stick made of the wood from the gallows she helped dismantle. She found the burned pilgrim in the square, hands calloused, eyes distant. "Why plant where nothing grows?" she asked. "Because this is where effort was abandoned." She sat beside him. "Then let's see what happens when we don't abandon it." Together they worked quietly, consistently. Others joined them, not many at first. A child carrying water, a smith donating tools, a widow humming forgotten songs to sprout latent winds. The soil changed. So did the people. Chapter 3. The magistrate of Karen's Bend returned with banners and regulations. "This land is unregistered," he declared. "All produce belongs to the state." The pilgrim bowed. "Take what you must, but you cannot tax the labor of healing." The blind healer smiled behind him. "Letting go is not failure. It is the deeper root of power." The people of Karen's Bend stood not in defiance, but in presence. Silent, resolved, the magistrate left, and never returned. Seasons passed. The square became a garden. The ashes now soil, the seeds now trees, and the people, not wealthy, but old. The pilgrim disappeared one spring morning, leaving only his wagon now empty. The healer taught the next generation. And on the chapel wall, someone carved, "Hard work does not beg for reward. It becomes it." And under that, in the end, all roots remember ash, because nothing was wasted. Not pain, not time, not even fire. Title: The Time Between Battles. Year: 128,461,538.5. Year: A Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The clock with no face ticked louder in silence than in sound. Mounted on the wall of the nameless fort, it had no hands, no numbers, only a slow heartbeat of gears that responded to acts of compassion. Each time someone showed empathy, it moved. When the fort was founded, it hadn't moved in centuries. Then came the spirit of war. She arrived in battered armor, dragging behind her a cart of broken weapons, her eyes burning with memories of every battlefield she'd walked through. Most believed she came to conquer. She came to listen. She knelt at the base of the clock and said nothing for 3 days. On the 4th it ticked once. Chapter 2. The people of the fort were wary. They spoke in strategies, trusted only logistics, and measured value by efficiency. But the spirit began walking the city not as a warrior, but a witness. She tended to the wounds no one admitted they held, griefs, guilt-laced decisions, forgotten kindnesses. And beside her walked the clock with no face, ticking louder each day. A child asked her, "Why do you care so much?" She replied, "Because empathy is the only sword that can cut through what war never could." They carved that into the wall. Then came the trial. Bandits from the outer rings demanded tribute. The council prepared for battle. The spirit of war walked alone to their camp, with tea and a story. Chapter 3. She told them of a soldier who broke her spear to bind the wounds of her enemy, the commander who forgave the traitor that saved a child, the clock that marked progress not by time, but by tenderness. The bandits listened, laid down arms, joined the city, not out of fear, but from being seen. The clock moved 12 times that night. It chimed for the first time in recorded history. Obstacles don't test your strength, they reveal it. And what the spirit of war revealed was that progress built on force is brittle, but progress built on care endures, because the face of time is shaped not by conquest, but by compassion. And the fort, once nameless, gained a name. The city that listened. Title: The Compass of Letting Go. Year: 128,269,230.8. Bureau: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The one who waits sat at the edge of the hollow gate, unmoving. They had been there since the last sun fell, a silent fixture in a land where time forgot to pass. No one remembered their name, only that they watched the void beyond the gate, a vast nothingness once rumored to be the cradle of stars. They had not moved in 20 years, until the child of the void arrived. She came wrapped in twilight, bare feet, silent, her eyes wide not with fear but wonder. She stood beside the one and waited too, not speaking. After 2 hours, the one finally said, "You should not be here." "I was born from here," she answered. He turned, and the world shifted, captured too. The townspeople said the gate must never be crossed, that beyond it lay ruin, madness unraveling. But the child asked only one question: "If nothing is beyond it, why does it call us?" She spent her days collecting stories from the hedge, whispers from the wind, broken reflections in puddles. The way silence hummed in patterns. The one watched. He had once crossed the gate. He had tried to fix the world by sealing what he could not understand. He failed, and in shame chose to wait instead of act. But the child was different. She did not seek control. She sought connection. "It's not about what's behind the gate," she said. "It's about what we're not doing here." And she began to teach others what she heard from the void, not commands, but questions. What do you take responsibility for? What part of the silence is yours? Chapter 3. The drought struck the lowlands. The town council froze. Old systems collapsed into blame and rigidity. The child and the one gathered volunteers, not experts, but listeners. They mapped the community's fears before they mapped its wells. They shared labor, but more importantly, they shared accountability. And something shifted. Food came from cooperation, not regulation. Water flowed not from order, but organization. And slowly, the people stopped waiting for someone else. They began. The one who waits finally stood. He carved a phrase into the stone gate. The need for control is a compass that always points away from the self. The child smiled and walked into the gate, not to escape, to explore, to lead, because personal responsibility is not a burden. It is a lantern, and the void, no longer empty. It was full of echoes waiting to be answered. Title: The Shards of What Came Before. Year: 128,076,923.1. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The bone scribe etched history into marrow, not metaphorically, literally. In the galactic colony of Valen, where AI curated every lesson and emotion was considered an obstacle to progress, she carved forgotten events into the bones of extinct creatures. These relics sagged when touched, revealing visceral memories of truth long erased. She was labeled a mystic, a relic, but the spirit of war sought her out, not for what she recorded, for what she remembered. They met beneath the rings of ardor, where the stars hummed with tension, and old satellite ruins floated like punctuation marks in the sentence of time. "I've read every log," said the spirit. "Then you know nothing," said the scribe. Chapter 2. They entered the archive of regrets, a vault of bone-tuned memory sealed since the fourth collapse. Each slab pulsed with stories sterilized in modern textbooks, insurrections called riots, heroes buried as errors, warnings discarded as noise. The spirit touched one, saw herself, not in victory, in silence. A past version, full of zeal, ignoring the cries of dissenters she was told to suppress. Each shard of veiled truth drew her deeper into the path carved for her spirit. She recoiled. What use is this pain? To stop you from causing more. Outside, the governors of Valen debated deploying quantum pacifiers, devices meant to neutralize emotion during civic unrest. The bone scribe and spirit of war returned to stop them, not with force, with memory. Chapter 3. At the council chamber, the scribe lay out bones, not as threat, as testimony. She invited the governors to touch them. At first, they mocked. Then they wept. One by one, they relived the pain they had justified. The spirit of war stood before them and said, "We conquer because we forget." But forgetting is not evolution. It is recursion. The policy was shelved, replaced with a new program. The emotional archives, cultural memory, sharing, mandatory studies, and forgotten empathy. The colony did not dissolve. It bloomed. Each week, scribe placed a new bone at the city's gate, each one a story, each one a warning, because understanding history is not reverence. It is prevention, and the spirit of war. She now fought only for remembrance, for peace carved deep, where no lie could survive, not even in bone. Title: Spinner Who Dropped the Thread. Year: 127,884,615.4. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The threadless spinner was not always threadless. Once she spun fate from a tower of winds, weaving destinies with the flick of her wrist. An abiding sense of comedic timing. Her tapestries stitched weddings beside wars, and rebellion beside reconciliation. The world danced to her stitching until she stopped. No tragedy, no drama, just a dropped spool in a shrub. Too many people thinking they know the plot, she muttered, and she walked away. Now she ran a traveling hat shop. No one bought the hats, but everyone left wearing a better idea. One day, a flaming stranger crash-landed in her cart. Literally, a fire that forgets, clad in mismatched armor, eyes smoldering with confusion. I was chasing a dragon, he said. You chased yourself into a joke, she replied. Where am I? In the space between plans and puntlines. He blinked and stayed. Chapter 2. The fire that forgets was born with a memory like wax melting under pressure, reforming at whim. He remembered why he fought until he didn't. Remembered who he loved until he got distracted. But the spinner didn't care. She gave him a broom and a blank scroll. Write what you forget. Sweep what you cling to. He swept furiously and slowly remembered that forgetting could be freeing. Together, they wandered through confused villages where everyone was trying so hard to matter. They'd forgotten how to live. She rewrote tax codes as limericks. He taught swordplay using carrots. One small laugh at a time, minds cracked open, and through the cracks. Light. Chapter 3. In the town of Forwind, a bureaucratic oracle declared fate was fixed and joy was taxed. The spinner sighed. The fire growled. They challenged the oracle to a debate. On one side, spreadsheets, doctrine, and cosmic precedent. On the other, a fire juggler and a woman spinning invisible hats. They won, because halfway through, the oracle laughed, first in centuries, and then declared, I resign. I want to become a baker. The town erupted in celebration. The spinner, dusting her sleeves, turned to her fiery friend. Letting go is not weakness, she said. It is the fort of continuation. He smiled. Then I've let go of everything but you. She winked. Then hold on loosely. And so they continued, not saving the world, but shifting it, one mindset at a time. One absurd hat at a time, and every time someone laughed and chose differently, the tapestry rewove itself, threadless, but better. Title: The Sacrifice of Fools. Year: 127,692,307.7. Era: Cradle of Titans. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The blind healer was tired of saving people who didn't want to be saved. She ran the Department of Practical Altruism in the metropolis of Irvine, a ministry so mired in absurdity it required 5 forms to donate blood and 3 signatures to rescue a drowning man if he hadn't opted out in advance. Into this bureaucratic tragedy danced the alchemical fool, wearing mismatched boots, armed with a talking pigeon and a satchel full of mislabeled elixirs. He proclaimed himself a minister of necessary madness. No one believed him, especially not the healer. That is, until he walked into her triage ward and cured 3 patients by mistake with soup. Chapter 2. The city was dying, not visibly on the surface. Irvine gleamed with efficiency, but underneath systems failed. Needs were ignored. Compassion had been outlawed under the doctrine of civic streamlining. The fool proposed a plan. It involved glitter and pigeons, and a staged public failure so grand it would unmask the absurdity of the laws suffocating the city. The healer refused. This isn't medicine, she said. It's mockery. The fool smiled. Exactly. Sometimes truth needs a louder costume. She sighed, then joined him. Together they enacted the plan on utter public disgrace. It involved fake potions, real injuries, and one highly inconvenient explosion of bubble tonic in the council's underground archives. Chapter 3. The scandal broke the news cycles. It revealed protocols so asinine they bordered on satire, because they were. People marched, laws changed, compassion, once laughed out of the room, was given its own department. The fool was arrested and released. By public demand, he vanished afterward, leaving behind a note and a single sentence on the back of a medicinal herb label. The most crucial decisions are often the ones that tear you open. The blind healer now runs the Department of Deliberate Kindness. She keeps the note and occasionally hears cooing pigeons from rooftops, because Sacrifice didn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wore bells and feathers, and a foolish grin. That saved the city.